In PyTest, you can take one single test function and convert it into dozens of test cases. That is called data-driven automation, right? Data-driven testing. And the feature that allows us to do this in PyTest is called Parameterize. So in this video, we're going to look at how to use that Parameterize feature, how it's going to help us. I'm going to use some dummy examples, but real code and real tests. That test that would run, but in real life, this is an example of situations where you have, for example, you want to test login with a different test cases or different email address, right? From Gmail, from Yahoo, from MSN, different domains, or for some reason, different types of emails. So the logic to validate is going to be the same. You're going to run test that's going to go open the browser and go type into it and verify whatever's supposed to happen. So the logic doesn't change, only the data changes. So you can write the code once and just keep reusing the same test with different data. So hence data-driven testing. Another example would be like API testing. You're going to make API calls, the same API call, same expected result. So the test code, the logic is going to be the same, but you're going to make that API call over and over and over again with different sets of data. So that would be like two examples. A negative test case would be the same thing, because sometimes you have a negative, like different combinations, like password too long, password too short, this, that. The logic of the test is the same, but the data itself is different. You want to test the same thing with different data, hence data-driven testing. So in PyTest, there is a built-in feature called Parameterize that's going to help us do that. So I'm going to use this code, the same code I've been using for this series. I'm creating a series of Python tutorials, PyTest tutorials. So make sure you check out the playlist. Each video is individual, like you can watch each video without depending on the others, but like different topics in different videos. So definitely, if you're learning PyTest, there's an advantage in watching the playlist. So help for this code is right there in the description. Make sure you check out the code and practice and run it and play around. That's really the only way you're going to learn, not just by watching. So here, inside of tests, inside of parameterized examples, you will find a file called test single parameter. We're going to use all those files. That's going to be our first one. So in this example, we're searching for, we're testing for search, right? We're going to search for different items. In this, the first test is searching for a t-shirt. The second test is searching for like a PDF. And the third test is searching for purified water. This is like a weird e-com site that sells everything, like Amazon. So here, when we look at the logic itself, every test is the same logic. The only thing difference is that search term, what we're searching for. Other than that, we're repeating code. You don't want to repeat code, right? D.R.Y, do not repeat yourself. I believe that's what D.R.Y stands for. So we don't want to repeat ourselves, and PyTest will gives us a mechanism to do that. So first, let's run this and let's make sure there are 3 tests in this file. So I'm going to run. I'm going to make this a little bigger, close this to the right, to the left. I'm going to say PyTest in the right place. So I'm going to say test single parameter.py. I'm just going to run the file. You can run multiple ways. One of them is just giving you the full file. Here we see that we got 3 tests. In fact, let me run it verbose. I'm just going to add -v so we get a little bit more info. So when I do -v, we get the test cases. So in this case, in terms of the looking at the console, right, it's nice. We see individual tests. We know which test is which. We'll come back to that, why I mentioned that. So now we see that we ran 3 tests and they're identical, other than the fact that they have different search terms. Now I'm going to comment all this out. What we're going to do is we're going to just create one function like this. That's going to do the 3 what we just did. So 3 is an example. You might have 10, you might have 20, you might even have more. Even the data can come from a file. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to add a decorator, PyTest. This is formatted so to make it easy for us. I can make it a little bit easy for you to see. I don't know why I didn't do that before. I feel like the formatting was the right formatting, but I think the first time you see it, I think this is probably better. So we have a function, the test function. It has to be a test function, right? Test underscore, whatever you want. Then we have a decorator on top of it. At PyTest mark parameterize, right? That's the magic right here. PyTest mark parameterized. Of course, you got to import PyTest. It should be imported up here. Now, inside of there, the first item is going to be the name of the parameter, right? This name here is going to match the parameter that you're going to pass into the function. So the function now takes in parameter, search term, and the search term. It's going to match 1 to 1 right there. Then for each of the data that you're going to pass into it, you're going to put a list. You're going to put a list and you're going to add the 3 search terms here. So if you want to make it the same as the other one, we're going to do t-shirt. We're going, because it makes sense to use the same examples. PDF, and purified water, right? Purified water. That's what I did before. So now I want to run this function three times for a t-shirt, for a PDF, and for purified water, right? So now let's run it. So as you can see, all the other ones are commented out, so they're not running. So what we're going to do is we're going to clear the screen, and we're going to run the same command, just the whole file with verbose. Now you can see all three of them run: PyTest, t-shirt, PDF, and purified water. So that is one function, but three tests. Even when you look at the results, it say 3 tests passed, but you only have one function. So this parameterize here is the magic here. So that's pretty much it. So I'm going to talk a little bit more, show you more examples, giving it an ID, giving it a marker. But the main concept is once you get this, then you can just build up on top of it, right? But once you get, the main thing you have to get is how do you parameterize? One function, one test, you got one parameter here, and then you have the list of parameters, okay? So that is basically how to use parameterize. Now let's go look at more examples. Now the next concept within this parameterize is for each test, we can give it an ID. So the next example you want to look at is this guy here, parameter with ID. It's fairly straightforward, and this is more semantics. It's like depending on what you want to see in the console and even in the report. I'm going to create a video coming up about reports, and this one we're just going to look at the console. So here is pretty much the same exact example. We are searching. We have 3 terms that we're searching for. Now the new thing we added is we added IDs. So we have a list here, the list of 3 things, right? Again, I don't know which one you prefer. You can put it in the comments, like formatted the way it was, or like this in one line, right? So I think personally, I feel like this is a little bit easier to see. So we have the search term, which is the parameter that doesn't change. Then we have the list of tests, right? The data for the test. So if we have 3 items in this list, we got 3 tests. If we have 4 items, we have 4 tests. Then the new thing is we're going to give each test an ID. So we're going to create another parameter called IDs. We don't have to pass into the function at all, to the test. Then we're going to create a list, and the number of items in the list would match the number of items here, and basically the number of tests. Then we're just going to give it an ID. This is just so it will show up down here with this term, whatever we wanted. In this case, it's pretty much straightforward, but sometimes you have some data here and you want to explain it, what that data is, what that test is. So you can give it an ID, an explanation of what that is. So let's run it so you can see what it looks like. That's the only difference. So we'll do, oops, need to be typing here in the terminal, clear. I'm going to say PyTest, test single parameters with id.py-v, lowercase v. There you go. So now the way it shows up here, the only difference is here. Earlier we saw, if we scroll up, earlier it would say t-shirt, PDF, purified water. But now in front of the test, that's the whole string that we put in as an ID would show up here. So here you can put something more descriptive, whatever you want, right? In this case, even if we don't put the ID, it's kind of obvious, we're searching, but sometimes you would have test cases that are not too obvious. So you will put IDs here, they will show up, the description will show up. They call it IDs, but it's more like a description, okay? So this is just a nice to have. You don't really need to use it, or you don't have to know it, but if you see it, if you like, get a job at a new company and you're studying their framework and you see that, you know why they're doing it. It's just to make it easier for you to see what's happening in the result, all right? So that's the second thing. Now the third thing is how to add markers. We need to add markers because a lot of times we use test case IDs, smoke, regression, and if we're doing this parameterize and we have 3 different tests, how are we going to identify each one of them by their test ID or something? So using IDs is like semantic. It's nice to have. You don't have to use it, but it is nice if you have some complicated logic. So the next thing we're going to see is how we're going to have multiple parameters. Sometimes you not just one data we're going to pass. Right now we're just passing search term. What if we want to add just more than search term, like multiple of them? So the next example is going to be this test multiple parameters. So if we look at that, I have it commented out. So here we have this function, right? I wanted to make this example a little bit more realistic. So it is actually testing a function. We have a function in our code, in our system, that is for verifying a strong password or not. So we're testing this basically, right? So we're writing a test for it. So when we write a test for it, we need to test this function with a weak password, with a strong password, different kinds of strings, passwords. We need to test that. So we want to test it, in this case, 4 times. We want to test it with a word that just says short, and this should return false. We want to test it with the word this guy, right? And this is also going to be false. With this guy, it's going to be false. We're going to test it with this guy, it's going to be true. So there's a logic here that I will say, if the password is this, return true. Is it strong or not, right? So when we're going to have 3 different tests for where it's going to fail, basically where it's going to say it's not a strong test, right? And then we're going to have one that's actually a strong password based on the requirements. So these requirements, we don't really care right now. So now the test needs to take 2 parameters. It needs to take the actual password and the expected result, right? In this case, in fact, the name of the parameter is pretty straightforward. It needs the password, so we're going to pass in short. Then what do we need? What do we expect the function that's being tested to return? We expect it to return false, all right? Then the next test, we're going to pass in another password. In my case, this looks pretty cool, pretty strong, but according to our requirements, that should be a false. So we're going to pass this into this function. We expect it to say false. Another test, we're going to pass this in. We're going to expect it to say false. And lastly, we're going to pass that in, and we're going to expect it to be true. So you can imagine these are very small, right? For this kind of function, we can come up with a lot of different combinations, making sure the password checker, this is a password checker, is going to actually do the right thing. So, but the key for this, what I want you to get is we passing in 2 parameters as opposed to the previous ones, we just pass in 1 parameter. So the same thing here, the first part in this parameterize, the first part you see here is going to be the 2 keys or the 2 parameters, comma separated, but they're within a string. The whole thing is 1 string. And then we have a list of tuples. So we got a list here, and each test is going to be a tuple, right? Each test is going to be a tuple, and then basically split up into 2. So you can have more, right? If you have 3, if I can have this something here, and then I can have a third one here and a third one here. So there's no limit to how many you can have, but 2, 3 is pretty much typical. So just to be sure this is working, we can run it. Let me clear this. I'm going to do PyTest dash, we don't even dash thing. Just going to run it by the name dash v, and there we go, right? It is passing. It doesn't have IDs or anything in this case. All right, 4 of them passed. 1 test, 1 function, 4 different tests. Now, when we're tracking, when we run our test, we usually want to track it in our test case management system, right? We need to synchronize it. In our test case management system, we have a list of tests, and each of those tests have some IDs. And a lot of times in PyTest, at least, or even actually in most frameworks, we want to add IDs to our test case so we know which test is automated compared to our test case management system, like TestLink or TestRail or Case.io or something like that. So we need to add IDs. And the way we do that is using markers, not the IDs we just talked about. Normally we do markers. In addition to just test case IDs, we also do smoke and regression and fast and slow and things like that, right? So we're going to look at how we do that. So the last example here is combined markers. So this actually has multiple concepts. I'm going to move pretty quick here, okay? So here, we're just testing this function. It's again similar thing. We're testing a function that's supposed to validate if an email is valid or not. Let me make this a little bit easier to see. So now when we do this, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different tests. And the function takes in 2 parameters. It takes in the email, it takes in the expected result. So the first thing in the parameterize function, I would say, is email and expected results, comma separated, but 1 big string, okay? Then we have the list. The list is basically whatever is in the list is each test. Then instead of just a simple tuple, we have this special function, PyTest-param. Then we have the first value, basically the email. Well, I should start with this one. The first value, the email, then the expected value. Then we have a keyword parameter that is called marks. And in the marks, we give it the marker. We could actually use a list here if we want to. I don't want to make it too complicated. It's already complicated. But in the marks, if you add multiple markers, for example, here we're adding a test case ID. Also, we want to say smoke. Then we would put this into a list like that. So comma separated list, right? I would put it in a list. I don't want to make it too confusing. Then in this case, we're doing ID. So we put a bunch of concepts that we learned so far, and we put it into this example. Taking 2 parameters, the first and second, email and expected result. We're going to add a marker, and we're going to add ID. So now we could run, you can see that, right? There's 4 of them here. So we could run this entire file. Let's do that first. Then we can run it by the marker. So I'm going to say PyTest tests combined -v. This should run all 4 of them for past valid email, invalid, valid, blah, blah, right? Based on the IDs. Now, each one has a marker, so I can actually run it by the marker. I can say PyTest -m. Let's say I want to run this guy TCID. Oh, it doesn't work that way actually, because the way we added the marker, let's change this marker just TCID 105, just for now, okay? It's a different, we talked about this in the marker video, so make sure you check out the markers video in the playlist. So if I just take this ID here and just run that, even though the function has 4 of them, it's parameterized, I can select just one and run just that one based on the marker. The way we do markers here is a little bit different. That's why I didn't use this guy. I don't want to just make it too complicated. But that's the whole point of marker. If I mark it as smoke, right? Let's say I mark this guy smoke, and I also mark this guy smoke. So we have, out of the 4, we consider 2 of them smoke. So here, when I run the test, I can do PyTest -m smoke, hit enter, and it's going to run 2 out of the 4 because the 2 have this smoke here. All right, so this video is getting a little long, but hopefully you learned about parameterize and how they help. So whenever you find yourself repeating code, if you're working in PyTest and you notice that you have multiple test cases and you automating them and they look like they're pretty much the same, the only thing is changing the data, you always have to think about, hey, can I just use one function and parameterize all the data, right? It's extremely powerful. It keeps your code clean and it's best practice. So make sure you do that. Make sure you explore it. I'll put a link to the official documentation as well, so you can go look into it a little bit more. But if you just execute these test cases, if you just go through those, that's all you need, okay? So if this is the first time you're checking me out, make sure you subscribe. All I do is create content related to QA automation, software testing, and so make sure you subscribe, like this video. Hopefully you find it useful. Check out my website, supersqa.com. I do one-on-one coaching, membership, and mentorship, and all of that. If you do want to become QA automation or SDET, check me out. I have everything you need to basically elevate your career. So I'll see you on the next video. It's going to be another PyTest video. I'm creating a series of PyTest so my students get familiar with it. All right, I'll see you on the next one.